This
that's
conference will now be recorded.
yeah, that's a
That's
beautiful thing
great. So
about.
so I'll be able to view everything or just hear the
No, you'll
audio?
be able to. It'll be audio, video, and when we're done, it'll compile, and then it'll send me a link, and then I'll share that link with you guys.
Oh, that is so awesome. So we don't have to take notes
Well, yeah,
or
that's up to
snippets.
you. Yeah, but
We
I
probably
mean,
still
yeah,
want to.
yeah.
Oh,
So I mean, yeah, and yeah, it's a great little thing. People like it. So I'm going to start over. So anyway, your data dictionaries that I just emailed you, it's a zip file, and when you unzip it, what you're going to do is you're going to look at inside the folder, and you're going to double click on the Advantage XML. That's your table of contents for your Sage data dictionaries. So you can
okay.
see here all the products, all the modules. So we'll look at AP. So I'm going to click on AP. And this section is
Okay.
organized into views. I personally prefer looking at the tables because I think some of the programmers might like the views better. But my background is more table related, so I always click on table and it just goes down to here. And this is an alphabetical listing of all your Sage 300 tables. So the first thing you have to do when you're developing a Sage Intelligence connection is demystify the tables in Sage 300. So we're just going to scroll down until we find what we want. And you can see, there are all sorts of tables, and there's going to be linking and all kinds of stuff that we'll get into maybe in a future lesson. But anyway, this is the table we're interested. APVEN is the AP vendor table, and this
Okay.
is the table that you this is the table that gets affected. Come on, why isn't my mouse? There we go. When I go into AP vendors and I go into AP vendors. So all of the fields that you see on this AP vendor tab are in the AP Ven screen, except the optional fields, statistics. So those are actually separate tables. So the address, contact, processing options, invoicing options are all there. Optional fields is a separate table, statistics is a separate table, activity is a separate table. So anyway, so the first thing you have to do is understand what you're working with. Okay, so we'll close that. And so what I always do when I'm building a report, especially when I first started, is I would figure out what tables I want. If there are multiple tables, I would figure out how they link. Do you understand what I mean by linking? Or
I think so. They have to have a common field, right?
exactly.
In order
So
to, okay.
right. So if I'm looking, for instance, a good example is if I'm looking at the AP Open, come on, okay, AP, I'm going to go back to my tables because I prefer that. If I'm looking at AP transactions, so I'm just going to, it's AP OBL, and I just know that because I've done it a while, but so say I wanted, these are all the AP transactions. So this would be, your invoice number, your vendor number, what kind of transaction it is. So for instance, transaction type, you're going to see it doesn't say invoice, it doesn't say debit note, it doesn't say credit note, it's just 1, 2, 3, 4. So you need these dictionaries so you can know if you're just wanting to list invoices, you want to make sure that your invoice, your document type equals 1, and that kind of thing,
Right.
and so forth. So anyway, but you'll notice if you're scrolling down here that the vendor number is there, but the vendor name is not. So how would I get the vendor name? I would do a report that had both APOBL and APVEN, and that way I can pull in that vendor name or maybe the phone number or whatever else is not stored in the document or in the AP Open Payables Documents table. So that's how you do linking, and we'll look at that. But I think for now, we're really interested in just a vendor list. So what we're going to do is we've established that the table we want is AP Venn. So I'm going to go back to that, and I'm going to scroll down. Okay, so then what we want to do is we want to identify the fields that we're interested in. So probably vendor ID and vendor name, which is, where is that? That's somewhere down here. Vendor name, short name, vendor name, here it is, Ven name. So you can see some of these fields are pretty obvious what they are, some of them are not. You know, like maybe you want the group and so on. So what fields do you want?
Do you have I don't know, we don't fill in, do you have to fill in a start date, or is that something the system does?
The system does that automatically. So that's the date.
Okay, so we can ask for that.
Yep, okay.
And then,
So
date, inactive date and date last maintained and on hold, I guess would be, what do you think, Karen?
start
I don't know what you're looking for.
It's from our internal control assessment. They wanted us to review all the vendors once a year.
Okay.
And so instead of going into 45 companies and looking at the vendor list, we can just run this report, and so we can see the vendor, we can see when it started, we can see if they're on hold, and then the last time they were maintained. So some of them that were really old, maybe we can clean up. I mean, this is like a small project, but it just came out, so I said we'd bring it up with Carol today.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's really good to have a clear example, because then I'm not just making stuff up, you know, that's possibly meaningless. So what we're going to do is we're going to build this report together, and then what you can do is using the video, you can try building it on your own. Does that sound like a good plan?
Okay, sounds good.
All right, so the first thing we have to do is identify the fields. So when I'm building a report, I usually have my data dictionaries on one screen and my connector on the other screen. So I'll just move this over for now, and we're going to go into the connector. So Sage Intelligence. So let's first talk, are you clear on how the licensing works? We probably should go through. We'll go.
You can go through it.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful. So with Sage 300, with your subscription, you get no additional cost. You get one report manager license, okay? You get one report designer license. Report designer is for developing financial statements. So if we decide that we're going to do financials for you guys, you're going to need that. So the way Sage Intelligence works is the report manager and the report viewer are both licensed by the Sage 300 named user and workstation. So if you look at your license manager and say you only have one report manager, so you can see my report manager is assigned to the user admin, which is what I'm logged in as. And okay, sorry, my phone is ringing. So it's attached to the admin user and to this laptop, which is Carol O-Win 10. So if you only have one report manager and both of you are wanting to use it, what you do is you go into this license and you delete the license. So that does not get rid of anything in a system-wide manner. It just disconnects the user and workstation to that license. So if Patty was using Report Manager and you only have one license, and then Karen wants to use Report Manager, all you do is go into License Manager, delete the license, and then...
Okay, yeah, we're familiar with that. Okay, thank you. I just didn't know, maybe there was something else in there that we weren't familiar with, but we do that all the time.
Yeah, so you know how to get around that. And if that becomes onerous, you can just buy another Report Manager license.
Right. Okay, great.
So before we can do anything, we've got to create a connection. So I'm going to go into the connector, and we're going to get into some stuff. And I also have a document that I've written with a whole bunch of notes and SQL syntax. I'll share that with you.
Oh, that's awesome, Carol.
Yeah, because some of this stuff, I mean, I have to look at that every time I do it. So you've got two connections that come with the system. And the first one is Sage ACPAC, which is, again, the old name of the product, Auto Connect, and then Sage ACPAC Consolidation. If you're doing a report that is going to only have to do with one company, you can use the Auto Connect. If you're wanting to touch multiple databases, then you need to use the consolidation, okay? That's why you need the connector, because that option is only available if you have the connector. So, so we've done that. We're going to right click and we're going to create a new data container. So a data container is connector speak for a hook into your Sage 300 database. So I'm going to add a connection. It looks like all we need is one table, and that's the AP Venn table, okay? So the first thing you have to do is you have to know, what am I doing here? The two you're probably going to use most are table, and that's just data from a single table, or a graphical join. And that would be the example I gave you where you were pulling the transactions and the vendors, and then you have to do you have to graphically link the two tables. So anyway, we're just doing, this is going to be an easy one because it's just an AP vendor. So you choose the database ID, so it just doesn't really matter which one. I'm going to choose SAM Inc. because that's what I'm working in, and I'm going to hit OK. Let's see, yes, and so you'll just say yes for this. Sage Intelligence can remember this, can cache this selection and use it for the remainder of your session. Just say yes, that's fine. So now it brings up all my tables. So again, that's where this data dictionary comes into play. So you can see the table is AP Venn. You can also see in the title bar here that we're looking at the AP Venn. So I'm just going to scroll down through my AP tables, and they're alphabetical. So I'm just going to go on down to AP Venn. AP Venn, here it is, and I'm checking it, and I'm going to hit OK. All right, so now I've linked to the table. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to rename my connection so it's more intuitive. So I'm going to say AP Vendor Table, AP Venn Consolidated. That way when I'm using the connection, it's really easy for me to know exactly what I'm getting. Okay, so all we've done is we've connected to the table. Now we have to add the fields that we need. So once again, I'm going to right click and I'm going to add expressions. Expressions are Sage Intelligence speak for fields, or expression could also be a date conversion SQL statement, which we are going to do, etc. So I'm just going to hit add expressions, and I'm wanting data fields. So we wanted the vendor ID, we wanted the date, let's see, the active status. So once again, I'm using the fields that we identified down here, okay? And so we're going to grab the SW hold. I guess you wanted the date inactive too, is that correct? And the date start? Yep, okay.
Yep.
And I think that's it, isn't it? Start date, vendor name. Did I get vendor name?
Last maintained, it's important.
Okay, last maintained and vendor name. Okay, so now I've got those fields now. So now we've got these fields. Now you can also rename them so they look nice in your report. So I'm just going to say vendor name. Okay. And I'm leaving these as is, and I'll show you why in a minute. And I'll leave that as is too, because I'm actually going to do a SQL statement for that. We're just going to say vendor number. Now, if I go into Sage Intelligence Report Manager, I'm going to show you some things about the way the data is stored in Sage 300. So I'm going to open up Sage or Intelligence Report Writer, and I'm going to create a new folder. What's your company name again? Center
Bridge Group.
That's right.
3 words.
Yep. So you can create a folder, call it whatever you want, and I'll call it that. Now I'm going to add a report. I'm going to add a standard report. So a standard report is a report that's made up, that is just a single Sage Intelligence report. A union report would be where you took, let's say we created a vendor report and then we created a GL transaction report and you want them all to show up on separate tabs. That would be a union report, or union reports made up of multiple standard reports. So right now we're just doing a standard report, and we'll put vendor list consolidated. Okay. And now it tells me to pick the connector, the container from connector. So now you can see why whenever I create a connection in my Consolidated, I always put Consolidated so it's real clear, because eventually you're probably going to have a lot of connections. So I'm going to choose Consolidated. And now it's going to ask me for the fields I want. So I'm just going to select all. And now I've got just a basic report. So now I'm going to look at my columns, and I'm just going to change the order. So I'm going to move the vendor number up. I'm just hitting move up. I'm going to move the vendor name up as well. Now, if I run out this report, you're going to see, oh, right, I have to actually tell it what database is. So that's important. Okay. So the database consolidation list. So when you do when you use the consolidated connector, you've got to define the consolidation. So I am going to choose the databases that I want. Now, this list is populated with any database that I've opened in the report manager. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go to all of your companies, open the report manager and close it, and that will put it into this cache. Okay.
Right. Yeah, we have them all there. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to hit OK, and now I can actually run the report. So I'm going to run the report. Now it's going to take a minute. And it gives you these little status stripe lines, and you can see down here, it's doing its thing, and it's generating the data on an Excel spreadsheet. So once all this graphic stuff goes away, and you've got 43 companies, so it's going to take a little while, but that's all right. So I'm going to move my Excel spreadsheet over. So now you can see some of these values here. So date last maintained. You can see this is the way Sage 300 stores a date, start date, and then active and on hold. So we have to go back to our data dictionaries and figure out what these values refer to. So let me do that. Okay, so SW inactive, 0 is inactive, 1 is active. 0 is not on hold, 1 is on hold. So if you want it to be a little clearer, what we can do is do a SQL statement that will convert these to yes/no fields, okay?
Okay.
We can also do a SQL statement that will convert this to a date. We cannot do a SQL statement for this one because you'll get an error, because if the vendor's never been made inactive, you're going to have a 0 value, and it can't convert that as a date.
Okay.
So I found that out through lots of struggle, like, why isn't this working? But that's why. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my document that I use, that I'm going to share with you. So let me find that, Sage Intelligence. Here we go. In my tech notes. And this one, handy formulas and notes. Because you'll see, okay, that these are, there's a lot of syntax that you have to know. And I'm not a SQL programmer. So here's mine. Date conversion. Let's see, did I actually figure this out? I can't remember if I did. I'll find out. But anyway, this is your crazy syntax. So this is some examples of converting those numeric values. So in the APOBL, remember I showed you the transaction types 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc.
Yeah.
So this is the SQL statement for that. So when APOBL.transaction type equals 1, then give me invoice, and so on and so on and so on. And that's the syntax. And this here, by the way, is a single quote. So when I write these things, I just drop them in here. And here's a date conversion syntax. So I will take that. And then what I do is I open a notepad, and then I do it on Notepad. So, all right, so what we want is APVen. So it's APVen, and then the field is date start, okay. And then I'm just gonna drop that into the connector. Okay, so I'm gonna open the connector, and I'm gonna create an expression, and it's gonna be a SQL expression, and it's gonna be, I'm gonna put a nice title here, start date, and then I'm just gonna drop my SQL right in there. So now I'm gonna open this up, and I'm gonna make sure I did it right. So I'm gonna execute, and you can see I'm getting nice looking dates here, okay?
Yeah.
All right, so let's see, and what's the other one? So one of the reasons I add the raw data fields to my connection, even though I'm not actually going to use them in my report, is it gives me a nice cheat sheet. So going back to my notepad, I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to just drop it here. And so my next date is going to be date last maintained. So see this, you can actually grab your table name right here. So I can copy it, and then I can drop it right in here. And now I've got my new SQL statement. Yep, it's all about cheating, you know.
Shortcuts.
You got it. So I'm going to drop that in. Then I'm going to hit the little ellipsis, and I'm going to execute to make sure I don't have an error in my syntax, because it's easier to do it here. Okay, so now the next thing we want is the on hold statement, okay? So once again, I'm going to look at my document and find something that I've done that's similar, and this will work. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to put that one in my notepad. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my connector, and I'm going to look at this field here, copy it, and I'm going to paste. And there's only 2 values in this table, so I can delete. Whoops, I'm doing the wrong thing. I'm here. So I don't really need all these lines. So I'm going to get rid of all of this. And I'm going to say equals 0. And I'm looking at my data dictionary, then inactive. Inactive is 0. And if it's 1, it's going to be active. Whoops. Okay, so now I have another statement. I'm going to right click, I'm going to copy, I'm going to create one here, and it's going to be a SQL expression, and I'll just call it active. And I'm actually just going to hit OK, and I'm going to go right to my edit since it's a multi-line statement. And now I'm going to execute it and make sure, and you can see that's working. That's good. And I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to hit apply, and that's that. So once again, the data inactive, I think there's probably a way to do it. I haven't figured it out yet, so I'll play with that and I will let you know. Probably doing an if-then where if it's 0, then, you know, put an NA and or something like that. But I'll send you that syntax once I figure it out. But for now, we can just leave the date inactive, and I'll give that as a date, inactive date. Okay, so apply. All right, so now I've got my connector cleaned up a little bit. So now I am going to find my report manager, and I'm going to go back to my vendor list. I'm going to go back to my columns. I'm going to get rid of these. Oh, and I forgot the on hold actually, so we jump back in. Okay, so once again, we'll do the same thing. And on hold is looking at my data dictionary. So the field name is SW hold. So if SW hold is 0, then no. Else, yes. Okay, so we're going to grab that, copy, and I'll add my last expression. SQL. And I'll drop that in once I go in. And I'm going to execute to make sure I didn't screw it up, and we're good. And I'll apply, and now I'll go back to the report manager. And we will go back to our columns, and I'm going to get rid of these columns because now I have them pretty. So I'll move them, and I'm going to add these guys here. Whoops.
Okay.
Date, one hold, start date, and date last maintained. So we can remove that one. Okay, so inactive date's going to be ugly, but that's okay. So now we're going to hit run. And we're going to let it do its thing.
So would we be able to start a new recording when you show us the second question we had, which was about how to get transactions across companies?
What we could do is we could terminate this meeting, and then I'll just shoot you an email, and we can just use my automatic go-to-meeting.
Okay, that would be great. It would be nice to have two separate.
Yep. Okay, so let's look at this. Where is it? Where is it? Here it is. Here we are. Book 2. And there you go. So look, it looks much nicer now.
Okay. One question, Carol. Where can I tell what company these vendors are coming from?
Okay. Yeah.
I guess I forgot to.
Yeah. You know,
specify.
So did I. Yeah, I should have thought of that. But anyway, so let's see. We may actually have to do multiple tables here, but let's just see. So add expressions. I'm not sure if that's in the data table, but let's see. Base table. Yeah, that's a good, let's see. I think we're going to have to add something, and where are we going to add that? So yeah, that's a really good question. So add data table. Actually, let me see. Once we're in here, Yeah, I don't think, if it was the report designer, it would be very easy because it's real obvious where it's coming from. But yeah, that's, okay, so now we have to figure out, where we're linking to. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back, we're going to add a database container, and we're going to do a graphical join. So AP vendors and company ID, console. Okay, so the question is, where's that going to get linked? And that's a question I'm not really certain where that's going to, let me think about this. Actually, let me jump in my, let's see, audit. Oh, maybe audit org. You know what? That might actually be the table. That might be what we need. So let's look at that. We're going to add a field, audit org. I'm hoping that's going to give me what I need. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to look at sample data. Yes, yay. Okay, that makes me very happy. Okay, so audit org is the table you're going to want, or the field you're going to want. So let's, so this is going to be, so org is going to be your database ID. So now we're going to go back to our report manager, and we're going to add yet another column, and it's going to be company ID. And we'll just move that up, I guess, maybe to the first, and we'll run it. And let's see what it looks like. And here it comes. Beautiful. I can see it coming up on my other screen. So now it's almost done. Okay. So here we are. So now we have our SAM Limited and SAM Inc. So yep, there you go. So all Sage 300 database tables have that audit org in it. So that's going to be your field. Okay.
Okay, great. So then I can copy and paste this to another Excel spreadsheet and put in filters if I want to filter by vendor name and things like that.
Well, you can, yes, you can do that. There's a couple things you can do. So if you're wanting to, let me just back up a minute. Is this the first real dive into Sage Intelligence for you guys, or do you have you played with a little bit?
We've sort of just copied existing
Gotcha.
programs and changed account numbers, and we sort of just have been
Gotcha.
copying what other people have done for us. So I guess this is our first time sort of really diving.
Your first deep look at it. Okay, so you can actually filter from the report manager. So looking at, so now we've looked at the properties, okay, and we've looked at when you have a consolidation, how to add your companies, and how to add columns, and that's just pulling things in from the connector. So the next thing we're going to look at is filters. So filters is going to be a permanent filter on the report. So when I say,
yeah, I don't think we want a permanent filter. I like the way it looks now, but show us filters anyway, just in case we would need.
So say you wanted inactive date, or you wanted vendors on hold only, just as an example. Okay. So I'm going to say I want vendors on hold, and it's going to be equal to, and then we're selecting our data, of course, and then yes. So I'll hit that. I'm hitting the 3 dots, and it populates it. None of my sample vendors are on hold. So anyway, so this would be a report.
Okay.
Yep. So the filter is going to be on there. I mean, you can always change it. So when I say permanent, it's applied to the report every time you run it out.
Create a new report and rename it for different filters.
Yes, you could absolutely do that. A parameter, on the other hand, is something you choose at runtime. So if you said I want to add a parameter and I want my start date is going to be greater than, and then, I have to figure out what I want it to be greater than. Now with parameters, we've got these system variables that you can put in, which is kind of nice because it'll kind of prompt you for the syntax. So you can see when I click on that, you've got all kinds of information. So date or, month start, month end, prior year, all these date filters because this is a date field. So if I just want to populate it with today's, whoops, I'm going to highlight that. I'm populating it with today's date. Then when I run it out, when I run out the data, it's going to prompt me up here in the upper right, eventually. So see how that comes? It shows you your syntax.
Yes, we use that, yep.
Yep, so that's how a parameter works. So a parameter is done at runtime, and a date or a filter is applied. You don't get that pop-up to choose at runtime. That's the difference. Yep.
Good
So, whoops. So I'm actually not going to use that. So I'm going to do that. Now sort fields, that's pretty obvious what they are. You choose a field and you sort it by that. And you can have multiple sort fields. Aggregate filters we won't go into today. It's a little more advanced. But anyway, yeah, so that's how.
And how, Carol, how did you get this pop-up screen that has these tabs? That's under?
So that's under parameters, okay? So,
and then we choose a report.
Oh, okay.
Yep, so you build a parameter if you want something to be prompt at runtime that the user will be able to choose something. So for instance,
I understand that. Okay.
So, you might do that for a GL transaction report. Maybe you just want for one account number or a range of account numbers. You would build a parameter for that, okay? So, yeah, so that's that. Now,
so we can, instead of having all these different reports across companies for account numbers, we can have one report where we can just key in the account numbers that we want to look at?
Correct.
Can we take your transaction report and edit it?
I don't have a transaction report yet.
Your journal entry report. Can we edit that for like just seeing cash transactions?
Yes, I guess we could, yes.
Yeah, so if you wanted to do that,
Yeah, so today when we do the transaction report across companies, we're going to put, that's great, we'll put in a parameter, because I just had specific account numbers that I wanted to see, but Karen has different account numbers that she'd like to see. So we'll make the report where it's interactive, where we can just type in what account numbers we want to see right before we run it.
Correct.
Because right now I have a bunch of reports, but I have account numbers hard-coded in them. So every time we add a new account, I have to go in and add that account. And it's if you can create that, so we can even go back and maybe fix some of those reports so that they'll be more interactive.
Interactive, yep.
And sometimes we want a balance, and sometimes we want transactions.
Right, we have
two reports.
Right.
And
except for accounts payable and accounts receivable, because that's two different batches of some of them we'll keep, but yeah, we'll keep the old ones anyway. But that's really good to know. So we'll be able to go back and change our balance reports so that we could just, instead of hard coding, we'll just great.
Now I'm going to show you something else that's really pretty amazing. On YouTube, you can actually find a ton of Sage Intelligence tutorials. I mean, tons.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're going to look up, just go to YouTube, Sage Intelligence. You can tell I look this up frequently. Sage Intelligence. I mean, honestly, I took the class with Sage, a while back, but there are things that I look up, I use these things all the time. So Sage Intelligence, creating new reports, Sage 300 intelligence reporting. There's a whole list. There's things on the report designer. I mean, overview of intelligence reporting and, blah, 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 blah. Copy and rename. I mean, the report designer is for financials, financial reporting,
YouTube in here the other day.
And yeah, there's just so many. So, you can tell that Sage is really committed to this product because they put so much these are all written,
That's great. I never even thought to look there.
No.
Yeah. And I've actually got a few myself. Let's see.
Oh, you posted a few on YouTube?
I have, yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so when I do training, there's my dogs.
Oh, is that Corgi?
They are, yeah.
Oh, cutie.
So, yeah, so here's some training that I've done, for different clients. There's some introduction, anyway. Yeah, there's some that I've done and there's some that other people have done. I think I've got one on the connector, just basically building a connection. But anyway, yeah, so you can look for that. They're up. And anyway, yeah, so that's a great resource, and it's free, and free is always good,
If it's free, it's for me.
Yeah, so of course, once you get this data out into Excel, you've got the entire realm of possibilities for Excel at your fingertips. So once you get into transactional data, this is more of a list type function, but once you get into the transactional data, you can build pivot tables and do all this. So this right now is just a raw data report. And it's important to know that sheet 1 always runs out the raw data. Sheet 2 is where your parameters are listed. So run data,
Okay.
if you add any filters or parameters, you can see. This is there's no template yet because I haven't saved as a template. It tells you what databases are being used, etc. So if you were to build a pivot table, you'd want to do that on sheet 3 because otherwise sheet 1 is always going to get overwritten by your data. And so if you end up doing something, fancy with pivot tables and, all kinds of nice things, what you can actually do is hide sheet 1s and sheets 2 so that when you distribute the report, you're just getting the relevant information, the pie charts or, whatever it is that you've developed. So once you've done all of this in in Excel, then you leave this sheet open and then you go back to Report Manager and you hit Save Excel Template.
Yes, I've done that.
You've done that, so you know how that works. So it's very important to make sure you're grabbing the right workbook because otherwise, that's a mistake you might make once.
Right.
If you've got a report that you've done a lot of work with, I always back it up before I start doing a lot more work with it. So I usually create a folder called backups, and then I call it AP vendor list backup 1 or AP ven back 1 or something like that, so that if I completely screw it up, I've always got a fallback, so that's, just best practices stuff. So this report, I don't even think really needs a template because it's just a data dump, really. So, yeah. But, as you go further, you'll probably need to do that. So, so are you comfy with what we've talked about?
Yes, I am.
Good. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to end this meeting and I'm going to send you another meeting invitation and we'll start our second one.
That sounds great. Is it okay if we take a five-minute break?
I would be perfectly fine with that. I'll send you to the GoToMeeting. I'll take a break myself. And why don't we say we'll start at like 10 after 12 or 12 o'clock?
That sounds great.
10 after? Okay, terrific. I'll talk to you then.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much, Carol.
Yep, bye-bye.